This is Arsecast Extra. Hello and welcome to another Arsecast Extra, as always, with James from Gunnerblog. James, good morning to you.
Good morning, Andrew. How you doing?
I'm all right. I can tell you something definitively, because I feel like there's going to be a lot of stuff which I can't really say definitively one way or the other, but I can definitely tell you this. I really don't like games against Man City.
Yeah, nor do I. Well, we keep losing them. Well, I mean, that's one of the factors.
That is definitely a significant factor. I'm not playing that down in any way. I think that's, I don't know what it is. I find them strange to think about. I find them strange to experience. I find them strange to analyze, because there's a logical part, a rational part of your head, and you look at Man City and you look at all the myriad reasons as to why they would be better than us, because, they're X amount of years into the Pep project, if you like, the finances, they're much more, they're a better run club, they're a more established team, all of those things. And losing to a team that's just won 17 games in a row, who've beaten Chelsea, who've beaten Everton, who've beaten Liverpool and scored 4 against Liverpool, losing to them, it isn't not that it's a good thing, but you can understand why it happens, right?
Yeah, there's no shame per se in that.
Sure, but at the same time, there's something like really disheartening about playing them, because I don't know if it's just that the gulf is so big and it becomes apparent every time you play them. I had a really weird moment yesterday where I was I'm not going to say I was like excited for the game, because I was a bit trepidatious, because of Man City and everything else. But, I watched a bit of the build-up, which I don't normally do, and it was sort of doing the teams, and Martin Tyler did his "and it's live" bit. Sure. And then I realised I was watching on Sky Channel 401, which has the fake crowd noise. Uh-huh. So I turned over just as the game kicked off onto 402 for the no crowd noise. And it was like a punch in the stomach in a way, because it just went from this like, okay, it's fake, it's not real, it's an act, whatever way you want to go, to nothing.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely sucked the life out of whatever little bit of excitement I had about it. And then, of course, you can see the goal to Raheem Sterling after 2 minutes, and that doesn't help either, So there's
got more silent somehow.
Yeah. It's strange. I just don't like them as experiences, and I will absolutely admit that our lack of competitiveness in these games is a part of it. But I just feel overall there's something to them that I could live without, if you like. Yeah, I don't know how to describe it.
I think your point about the crowd noise, by the way, I know not everyone feels like this, but for me, when all this is over, and one day it will be over, and there are fans back in stadiums, I do wonder if I might sort of just file away this period of football somewhere, compartmentalise it and be like, well, that didn't really count, because that wasn't really football. And that is honestly how I feel about it. Like, I can't stress enough how divorced this is from what I really love about the sport at the moment.
I think that's true of everybody. And look, that's not to make any excuses about us and what we're doing or our season or anything like it. But I think you're right. There will come a point where we look back on this and just go, whoa. It's like a season in brackets or with an asterisk or whatever way you want to put it.
Absolutely.
There is something just not right about it. And again, I suspect that if we were playing better and if we were scoring more goals and if we had more points and if we were in the top 4, it probably wouldn't be quite as significant an issue. Maybe it would. I don't know. Maybe it would.
Yeah,
but
I still think when you look at this Premier League season and some of the stuff that's going on, I do think that asterisk will be kind of justified in future. I think people will look at it and go, oh, that was weird. A lot of weird stuff was going on.
Yeah.
And none of this is to make any excuses for Arsenal, by the way.
Yeah.
And their performances, which have been really disappointing. It's just, I know exactly what you mean about that kind of gut punch and realising, that this is such an alien setting. But also, I think even with crowds, games against Man City can quickly feel like that. And it is almost like being kind of crushed by a python, and you feel like it's closing in on you, and you the more you struggle, the more they can just kind of tighten it. It feels like your kind of freedom is illusory, because every time you try and do anything, they can just turn up a notch, squeeze those muscles a little bit tighter.
Football in quicksand or something, or like I said in the blog today, it's like, because of the relentless machine-like quality of City, it's like death by 1,000 cuts from a footballing perspective. There seems to be an inevitability about what's going to happen, and even if City hadn't scored that early goal, and we'll deal with all that in the coming minutes, it always felt, or it does feel like, because of the quality they have, okay, they didn't get the goal in the second minute, but they'll just play until they get it in the 15th or the 19th or the 32nd minute, whatever it is. You always feel like they have the ability to kind of go up a gear or another gear, or however many gears it takes for them to get the goals that they need in a game, which is true of what they've done of late, not just to us as well. I think it's reasonable to point out.
No, and it is interesting. I mean, their team, unlike a lot of great teams, it's not one with kind of one particularly standout. I mean, they've got some really great players, but it's not built around one player. Do you know what I mean? And they've even kind of divorced themselves from the idea of having a conventional centre forward.
That was funny, was it? Did you see the Arteta interview? I don't know if he was being tongue in cheek or if he was being dead serious, but before the game, he was asked about City's setup, and he said, "Well, it looks like Pep has finally figured out what he's always wanted to do: play without strikers."
Yeah, I mean, he would know, I guess. I'm sure it's something they talked about. And we're doing an interesting experimental thing where we play with strikers, but we just never get them the ball. It's a really exciting tactical development from Mikel Arteta. But I mean, listen, for credit to City, they're obviously in the midst of an incredible run, and in this strange season, you wonder how long it might go on. But I know precisely what you mean. It always feels like they have an extra gear. And I kind of came out of this game feeling like, well, it was a 1-goal margin. We could have pushed on there. We could have maybe threatened that. We could have done something. But I don't doubt that had we done so, if they had really wanted to, they might have had another gear to go to.
I mean, that is the difficulty. I get it. I feel like maybe we could have done more, particularly in the final 20 minutes. It reminded me of the first game this season against them, where we were thinking, could we have done more in the final 20 minutes? And look, there's a risk-reward thing going on there as well, in that, if you push forward against a team like Man City, you're going to leave yourself open. If you leave yourself open, chances are, unless you score, you're going to concede more goals. And then there's the whole argument, well, you might as well lose 2-0 than 1-0. But it might be 4-0, so that's damaging as well. And it is the heart versus the head argument with this game for me, right? Because my head tells me, yes, City won. City are the better team. They have the better players. They've got a better coach. They've got a better, more established team. They're more complete. Like I said at the start, all the reasons that your head tells you a City win in this game isn't necessarily something to get particularly exercised about. But your heart, you want Arsenal to compete. You want Arsenal to be competitive. I realise that there is a very fine line between defeatism and realism. Saying City are more likely than us to win this game is not defeatism, it's realism. But at the same time, you think about the last 20 minutes, could we have put on Ceballos, for example, for El Neni, just to give us a bit more in midfield? Would people have been understanding if we'd gone for it? I mean, would people be okay with losing 3-0 if you concede twice in the last 15 minutes? I mean,
some people would.
I know. Not everybody would. People would say, well, 3-0, that's a drubbing. Why don't you try and keep it tight? Which is maybe what we tried to do, or, And I think the other part of it is like, just saying have a go at City in the final 20 minutes is a bit easier said than done as well, right? Because, they are a really good team. They are. I think maybe... when you look at what they are defensively now, I mean, there were times in the last, 2 years, you might have looked at Man City defensively and said, if there's a weakness in this City team, that's where it is. Sure. Individually and also collectively, they've gone through a glutton of central defenders who haven't quite worked out. I think they've found the formula now. Not simply with the players that they have at the back, but how well organised they are in general. And, they're a really difficult team to play against. So, I would have loved us to have more of a go, but I also understand how difficult that is.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they were having a go.
Yeah, I mean, that's,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But at that point, how much energy do you have? Because you've been running around the whole game chasing the ball. You can't get near it at times because of the way City keep possession, particularly in the first half. Much more, I think, even in the second half. And I think we probably had more possession in the second half than they did. But yeah, so look, where do we start? Team selection?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, we all wondered what Mikel Arteta might do in the middle of this European tie, the extent to which he'd change it. What was it, about five changes in the end? Yeah,
so Tierney in for Cedric, Marie and Holding in for Luis and Gabriel, Elneny in for Ceballos, and Pepe came in for
Smith Rowe.
Smith Rowe, exactly. So, before the game, Arteta said, look, we've had some players who've been struggling to train the last few days. He isn't the only manager to talk about how difficult and how hard the schedule is when it comes to keeping your squad fresh. I mean, even Guardiola said that, and you look at the City bench yesterday.
Oh, it was absolutely crazy.
It's absurd. It's ridiculous. But even Guardiola is talking about how hard it is to keep things fresh. I mean, he's much more capable of doing it than many managers. But I think when it comes to team selection and some of the decisions, we probably have to err on the side of more knowledge going into those decisions behind the scenes than we have from the outside, right?
Yeah. And listen, some of those changes didn't make the team any weaker than Thursday. For example, Tierney in for Cedric. I think Pepe in his recent form, brings a lot. So in theory, that could have been a good addition. Rob Holding had been the starting centre-back until 2 games ago. So, I thought they were kind of pretty reasonable changes to make given the circumstances.
What did you make of the deployment of Saka and Pepe on the left and on the right, given how good Saka has been on the right-hand side? I
thought it was all about Cancelo, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I thought he was there to do a job on that left-hand side with Tierney more than Pepe would have.
Yeah, and also the way that Cancelo plays, and he has been amazing for City this season from right back or left back, but he comes in and plays as a kind of third central midfield player a lot of the time. And I guess Arteta was looking at that and thinking, I want someone to go with him. And ultimately, Saka is a player who has played as a kind of central midfielder and is more comfortable sort of splitting that role than Pepe. I know Saka's been in really good form on the right-hand side, and so people will say, why didn't we sort of think about ourselves first and foremost and just put our best player in his best position? I think it's really tricky, that one, because Arteta does have this tendency against City, I'm not going to say to overthink it, but to try and do something specific to cause them problems based on what he knows of them and Guardiola.
I think overthinking it is a reasonable... Well, I mean, we saw it in the first game. The false 9 thing with Willian was definite overthinking. I'm not sure there was that in this game. I think he was thinking quite specifically about what Cancelo does from the areas in which he plays.
It's tricky, isn't it? Because we just don't know if it's Pepe out on the left and Saka on the right. We don't know the kind of mayhem Cancelo causes or not. Do you know what I mean? So it's almost impossible to say. But clearly that was his thinking. And in fairness to Arteta, it didn't stop Saka being, I thought, comfortably our best player, particularly in the first half. Yeah,
I agree. But then it left us with a right-hand side that didn't really work.
No, it didn't.
There is a mountain of evidence now that as a combination, Bellerin and Pepe isn't always right. Like, it doesn't seem to function as well as we might like, despite the fact they've played together or more or less for coming up on 2 years now. They haven't really formed the sort of understanding that you would like to see. And I don't know where exactly to apportion the blame. I know some people will say it's entirely down to Bellerin. Some people will say it's down to Pepe. You know, it could be a combination of the two. I mean, Bellerin and Saka works reasonably well. How much that's got to do with Bellerin or just how good Saka is, it's another conversation. But
it's a really tricky one, that, because I do think that most teams have a kind of a bias on the side that they attack, and I do wonder if as well Arteta was looking at Cancelo and thinking, well, he does vacate that space, and if I put Saka and Tierney in combination on that side, you know, we could create something. And we did create overloads on that left hand side. Ultimately they didn't lead to anything, but you know, we were getting Tierney into really pretty decent positions, especially given how little we had the ball. So yeah, it is tricky, but I accept as well that Bellerin and Pepe don't seem to have any chemistry on that side whatsoever.
Yeah. I mean, do you think when it came to sort of the attacking areas of the pitch, he was looking at, let's say, on the left-hand side, because Aubameyang drifts out there, he's looking at Saka, Tierney, Aubameyang, and on the right-hand side, he's looking for Bellerin, Pepe, and Odegaard, and perhaps Odegaard to be the glue that brings those two together. Difficult circumstances. I know you can't say definitively really whether that worked or not against a team like City. I mean, it didn't work on the day. I mean, it's not to say that it might never work.
No, and listen, we both spoke really positively about Odegaard after the Benfica game, but this was a match that, to my mind, really passed him by. And I sort of think was kind of inevitable given how little possession we had, you know, and when we did have it, it seemed almost exclusively to go up that left flank, and his tendency is to drift out to the right, as you point out. So he really didn't get involved massively. I also think, sorry, but if you're looking at the right-hand side, you know, if you think about the Benfica game, the best chance we created in the game was from the right-hand side. And yes, it was from Saka spinning in behind. Oh, no, it wasn't. It was from Hector Bellerin playing a really, really good cross, which Aubameyang somehow tapped wide. But I think you have to look at the pass that plays Bellerin in, and it's from Dani Ceballos in that right-hand channel. Yeah. And I think, you know, we started Mohamed El Neni in this game. I guess Arteta felt he had to give one of the central midfielders a risk. But clearly, it cost us in terms of how we were able to progress the ball through the midfield, particularly on that right-hand side.
Yeah, I mean, the El Neni one is interesting in that, you know, he's not the most progressive player. We know that, but what he is reliable in possession.
Yeah.
How much that possession benefits your team is another question.
Well, and also the areas in which you have it. I mean,
sure.
You know, he's very good sort of kind of shuttling it around, essentially in a back three. I mean, you know,
he dropped in there a lot. Yeah, I mean, I had a look at his, you know, his passing stats. I mean, as you know, just in terms of pass completion, he you know, he was really good in that sense. He had 97% completed 61 passes, you know, which is a lot against a team like Man City who have the ball a great deal. But the areas in which he made those passes, 24 out of 24 in the defensive third, 32 out of 33 in the middle third, and 5 out of 6 in the attacking third. Now, I know that's not his place, or that's not where he's supposed to be on the pitch.
Yeah.
But it does tell you about the role that he played and whether that inhibits the team or whether his perhaps inability is, maybe that's the wrong word, but
inclination.
His inclination is to be safe in possession. And I think there's probably something to be said for that in a game against Man City, where if you lose the ball in your own half, you're going to be in big trouble. You know, they can turn over there and really cause you problems. So that reliability in those areas of the pitch is in some ways beneficial. But if you're looking to get the ball forward, if you're looking to release people like Odegaard, like Bellerin, like Pepe on that right-hand side, you know, because Xhaka's more to the left and El Neni's more to the right, so he's dovetailing with those guys, you know, he's not going to give you much in that sense, is he?
No, he's not. And I do feel like if you're not going to have loads of the ball, you know, having a Ceballos or having a Partey, someone who can kind of split the lines, or play a ball in over the top, or find a runner from deep. That ability to progress you into the final third with a pass is really valuable. And Xhaka's had some good games recently, but they've been with one of those guys next to him. And when I looked at this team, although I kind of didn't have a huge issue with the starting lineup, when I looked at the kind of the four central defensive players, Marie, Holding, Xhaka, Elneny, they weren't the most kind of press resistant quartet that we have. And against City, I think that can give you problems. None of them are particularly quick. None of them are particularly agile. And I think that also hindered our ability to kind of escape their press and get out.
Just to sort of compare the stats, Xhaka made 68 of 76 passes, so basically 90%. But again, matches with Elneny, 24-24 in the defensive third, 32 of 36 in the middle third, but 12 out of 16 attempted in the attacking third and 3 from 5 inside their penalty area, which, Elneny had none in that sense. So, he was that little bit more progressive, and, that's in part due to the way that Elneny played and dropped back in to be that third central defender, particularly in the second half. We saw that a great deal. Let's talk,
and Xhaka, I prefer, by the way, when he is the guy who's the deeper of the two midfielders. I mean, when he plays with Partey, if you look at the kind of average position maps, Partey's 15, 20 yards further ahead than Xhaka. He's the guy filling in as the kind of third centre-back and building it up much deeper. Obviously, Elneny, it's a different chemistry, it's a different combination, but particularly in the second half, and we'll come on to that, I felt that held us back a little bit.
So let's talk about their goal. We have a tendency to concede early against Man City when we play them in the league. It cannot have been something that was unmentioned in the build-up and in the team talk and in the preparation. Is like, lads, keep it tight, 10, 15 minutes, get to 20 minutes, see where we are at 0-0, and then, gauge the temperature of the game and see what we can do to react to what they're doing, etc., etc. And then you let in a goal in the second minute. Really, really frustrating, and very frustrating. Look, we can talk about how City might have just kept going and got the goal, and maybe they would have, but that goal in particular was the one which separated the sides at the end of 90 minutes is very frustrating for me because it was so preventable.
Yeah, I mean, Arteta said, didn't he, we prepared this scenario exactly, and the players basically didn't follow it. It was a really, really, really sloppy goal to concede. Kind of everything about it, really. I mean, obviously, particularly the way that Raheem Sterling, the smallest man in the penalty box, is able to kind of ghost away from his markers and stick that in. But I also think, Riyad Mahrez is probably allowed to get the cross in far too easily. Kieran Tierney backs off him a bit. And what do you think happens with Sterling? Is it a confusion between Holding and Bellerin about who's doing what there? Or
I think it's Holding's responsibility. I think he made a mistake. I don't know that he was properly switched on, and it's not the first time in recent weeks that Rob Holding has been caught out in the opening stages of a game. You think back to the Villa game, and he had one simple job to do in the penalty box for the Ollie Watkins goal, which was to get tight to his men. He didn't necessarily have to win the ball, but he had to make it difficult for Watkins to get a shot off. He didn't, and the deflection off Holding because he was too far away was what made it impossible for Matt Ryan to save it. Yesterday, I think Bellerin has a man on the back of him. I know Bellerin can see what's happening. I can't believe there isn't communication there. I think Holding looks back. He doesn't get close enough to Sterling. He's the wrong side of him. He's not tight enough, and when you're a 6-foot-something central defender and you're being out-jumped in the box by Raheem Sterling in the second minute of a game, that's on you, I'm afraid. And I thought there were elements of Holding's game. He responded pretty well, made some decent tackles, but that's a big, big error. And ultimately that error at the end of the 90 minutes is what separated the sides.
Yeah, I wonder as well, was it a factor? And it's not an excuse for the player, but I wonder the uncertainty over exactly who was going to be playing through the middle for City. You know, I wonder if that created a doubt in his mind of who's my man, who's coming from where. If so, sort of credit to them.
But there's nobody else in there. I mean, there's, you know, as the central defender, he's got nobody else to worry about. When you look at who is in the vicinity when he heads the ball in, is it Bernardo Silva who's in the 6-yard box? And Raheem Sterling is on the edge of the 6-yard box. And there's Bellerin, there's Holding, there's Marie, there's El Neni. And then I think Gundogan is sort of near the edge of the box. Maybe it's De Bruyne coming in at the top of the box. So it's not as if he had a plethora of options or a load of runners to confuse him. I just think it's a lapse in concentration.
Yeah. Do you think Tierney lets Mahrez get that cross in a little bit as well?
Yeah, maybe a little bit. And I think maybe he does.
Can I ask about Kieran Tierney, by the way? I mean, what did you make of his performance? I sort of came away from it thinking, you know, he did really well. He was really committed. He worked incredibly hard. He didn't look as fresh as I hoped he might look after his rest.
He looked absolutely banjaxed by about 40 minutes. I was looking at it. There was one moment where he got forward and he obviously bombed down the left. And like, it wasn't that he was taking his time to get back. It was that he just wasn't getting back. He was standing there getting his breather. I think he's very tired. I mean, afterwards he did say, look, I'm glad to get 90 minutes under my belt. So I think that must have been part of why he stayed on for the 90 minutes, because you could have made a good case for taking him off, couldn't you? You know, given his injury record. So I assume there's some method in the madness there, in that, like, 90 minutes into his legs is what he needs to get himself back to full fitness. Look, I think he had some really good moments, some of his overlapping. So, you know, he gives us that threat down the left-hand side. But some of his crossing was poor. You know, there was one in particular, I think, where maybe he was sent down by Xhaka. I can't remember exactly how it played out, but he just kind of clumped it behind, you know. It was a really poor delivery, maybe down to tiredness, fatigue, rustiness, whatever you want to call it. It wasn't great.
I just have a sort of, listen, maybe he's on the way back and within a couple of games he'll be flying like he was, but you know, he looks like a guy who needs a summer off and a pre-season pretty desperately to me. And I'm sure there's plenty of Premier League footballers in that position, to be fair. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he'll come back.
Well, how long did he miss? Oh, so he missed basically a month.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just wonder, is it purely a match fitness thing? You know, because he had a lower leg issue, then he had a bit of a knee issue, but you know, he was doing individual training and things like that. So it might just be a match fitness thing with him. We'll wait and see. Yeah.
He did create a chance for Saka, didn't he? The shot that he had that was kind of blocked by Aubameyang in the end.
Oh, yeah.
That was like our first real foray forward. I mean, City, I thought, could have scored. It felt like they could have scored a couple more in that first 15 minutes. I mean, they just came out the blocks flying and we couldn't get near them.
To be fair, we did make a change, I think, in terms of how we set up, which negated the effectiveness of what City were doing in the opening stages of the game. But like you, when that goal went in really early, I was thinking, oh shit, this could be a hammering here, you know?
Yeah.
And again, we come back to this thing, like, is 1-0 an acceptable defeat? Is that an acceptable way to think about what we should be doing? You know, it's a head versus heart thing again.
Well, yeah, I mean, my position on it is that I don't think 1-0, I don't think any defeat is great and you shouldn't be celebrating or pleased with any defeat. But my feeling was to be in the game with kind of half an hour, 20 minutes to go at 1-0. Certainly, if I'd been offered that, I would have taken it.
So is the issue not being able to do more with the final 15, 20 minutes?
And that was the issue at the Etihad as well. And one of the things they said on Sky that's quite interesting is they pondered whether the absence of crowd has an effect in that. You know, if there's 60,000 people there, does it demand an urgency that kind of never quite came from Arsenal in this match? Yeah,
I wonder, actually. I do wonder. But, you know, that's something every team is having to contend with.
Yeah.
And there are teams, I'm sure the stats will prove this, that finish games strongly. And we don't. And I think I'm sure it was Orbinho doing a stat about how many goals we've scored after the 75th minute in games this season, and we're level with West Brom or something like that. It's bad. So we don't finish games as strongly as we should or could, and maybe that's down to substitutions. That old chestnut again in terms of how we change the dynamic of a game, or are we able, or is Mikel Arteta able rather, to change the dynamic of a game sufficiently when we need to?
Yeah, we certainly don't throw the kitchen sink at anything, do we? It's never a case really that we kind of abandon the principles and just get the attacking players on.
All the strikers.
Yeah. Well, the old Wenger kind of 4 up front thing. I mean, I know that sounds astonishingly simplistic, but there is something to it, I suspect. And because effectively you take a gamble there, you create a situation that is going to put City under pressure or force them to change what they're doing, and it comes with risk. It comes with the risk that you get taken out on the counter-attack, but it also comes with the possibility that you might score. And I'm not sure Arsenal ever looked like scoring really in that second half yesterday.
Yeah. No.
Am I being unfair?
No, I don't think you are. We didn't create. We didn't. I think there were moments where perhaps we could have used the ball better. We could have held the ball up better. I know holding the ball up is not necessarily Aubameyang's greatest strength, but I still think he could have done better at times yesterday. Some of the final pass or the decision making not going to say the final third, but sort of trying to get into the final third wasn't always great. But yeah.
And what about the subs? Did you feel that they...
I'm trying to just remember exactly when we made them.
So 73 minutes was the first couple of changes, and it was Odegaard and Pepe came off for Smith Rowe and Lacazette.
I mean,
to be honest, I don't really object to those changes. There's a logic to both of those. I think the bigger issue for me is that we waited as long as we did to bring Dani Ceballos on and change what we were doing, kind of, in terms of building the play up. I just felt we desperately need... And maybe he's a guy who couldn't train this week. Maybe he's a guy who's in the red zone and really struggling, but we needed something else in the middle of the park.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, look, if Dani Ceballos couldn't train and could only play 4 minutes, what's the point in bringing him on for 4 minutes?
Yeah.
That would have been the one area where I felt if we were really going to go for it, we could have made the change. I think trying to do something more, putting a more progressive player in central midfield for the last 20 minutes, and I think as well, one of Ceballos isn't really a chump defensively either. It's not as if he doesn't give you anything from a defensive point of view. He's a hard-working guy and can get back and can cover in those positions. I think he's comfortable on the ball in his own defensive third and in the middle third, obviously. So, I don't know that it would have made us any less stable. Maybe a little bit, but it definitely would have given us a bit more going forward, particularly now that we had Saka on the right-hand side. He moved over there when Pepe went off. So, yeah, look, just a game I'm kind of glad to put behind us in a way. I mean, do you get a sense of disappointment about this game or this result? Like, in isolation, do you get that? Or do you think that this, or whatever sense of disappointment or frustration there might be about it, beyond the fact that, we were culpable for the goal that we let in, is the fact that this is now the 11th game we've lost in the Premier League this season?
I think it's partly that. I think it's the fact, to be honest, I think a lot of the frustration and kind of disappointment that I personally felt kind of came from the fact that ultimately, as a fan, I look forward to kind of every game Arsenal play. You know, it's 90 minutes in my week that I enjoy, and I'm like, right, this is going to be a contest, and it's going to be hopefully exciting, and there's a possibility that we might win. And when you concede a bad goal as early as we did, that excitement is kind of whipped from underneath your feet. You know, your feeling of like, right, we're going to have a real good go at this, disappears after 90 seconds. And then you've got 90 minutes of sort of stewing on it, hoping it's going to get better, kind of knowing it probably isn't going to. And so by the time the full-time whistle blows, you feel pretty sick about it. And I don't know, it just I think that the way in which we lost this contributes to that feeling of frustration as much as the losing of it. You know?
Yeah.
But it's also context, you know, it's where we are in the league. I mean, look, we all enjoyed Tottenham losing again at the weekend, but ultimately there's still a place above us, and we're also looking at a David Moyes West Ham team and thinking, how are they more than 10 points clear of us?
Yeah.
You know,
so
we're in a, you know, it's a very, very bad season, I think, by any measure. So I don't look. We know City are better than us, and you can see the gulf, and you can see how far away they are from us. And I don't think any Arsenal fan realistically expects us to be at City's level in the next few years. I honestly think there's no one out there who thinks, yeah, in 2 to 3 years we'll be competing with this Manchester City side. But, you know, we do expect to be better than we are. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I think we're having a bad season, no question, in Premier League terms.
Definitely. And you know, there are kind of some caveats and asterisks around this season, but I don't think they excuse the results.
No, I don't think so either. And every other team is dealing with the same caveats and asterisks, you know?
Yeah.
We can talk about, well, we didn't get a pre-season, neither did anyone else. We, you know, are suffering because of the schedule. Well, so is everyone else. You know, for us, it's maybe a little bit more pronounced because we have European football. But, you know, you won European football. It's your job. And it's the job of the players and the manager to deal with that. You know, that's what being a top-level club is all about. So for every reason, pretty much every other club is dealing with those things as well. Although I do think that there is a bit more going on at Arsenal given the circumstances at the club and how we're sort of coming through a post-Wenger, post-Emery kind of situation and some of the things we've been dealing with, you know, to try and rebuild, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe I think we probably have a question or two about this, so maybe we'll go into this a bit more in part 2.
Yeah, I also think that something I said before the City game is that I think the Benfica and Leicester games will weigh kind of heavier, you know, in the equation of kind of seeing where we are. And I think that's because we, as a fan base, we're collectively quite realistic about our capability of competing with Manchester City. But Leicester City are a different kettle of fish, and it will be interesting to see how that one goes.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Anything else on the game, on the performance, on the team selection that you want to touch on before we go to part 2?
I don't think so. I think we've covered most of what I.
Yeah, I mean, what is it? Is it a game we just put in a box now and leave to one side?
To an extent, yeah. I mean, if Arsenal go and beat Benfica. Then and get a result against Leicester. I mean, that feels like that would feel like a real success from this point. I mean, the thing is, we could be good enough to be in the top 4 and still get beat twice by Man City. You know, that's happening to plenty of teams.
Yeah.
The two, you know, us not being good enough to lay a glove on Man City, which we really didn't for 90 minutes. that doesn't preclude us being able to achieve our sort of realistic goals. So I guess to an extent, yeah, you can compartmentalise it. The big issue is we're not getting the results in the other games.
That is very true. That is very true. It's not games against Man City which really define your season.
No. Like, a lot of teams are going to lose to Man City. And a lot of teams are going to lose to Man City twice. But, it's the defeats we've had against, Villa and Wolves, or the teams we were losing to in that terrible run towards the end of last year. That's really what our season has been about, and why we're in the situation we're in.
Okay, right. Let's take a short break here. We will come back with your questions and more in part 2 right after this. Welcome back to the Arsecast Extra. This is part 2 of the show where we answer questions that you sent to us on Twitter at Gunnerblog and at Arseblog, and on the Arseblog Discord chat server, which you get access to if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon. So, questions. Right, let me ask you this one first. Joe McNamara, who's at Joe_McNamara 93, who says, "Morning, fellas. Feeling fairly philosophical about losing 1-0 to Man City, as sad and insipid as it was. But can somebody explain to me why Bukayo Saka played 90 minutes? If damage limitation was the name of the game, surely give him a rest." And I'm sure there are many other questions concerned about the amount of football that Bukayo Saka is playing right now.
Yeah. Well, I thought he wouldn't play. I think I said that on Friday. He did play, and I think was probably Arsenal's best player, and probably their best hope of getting something in this game. Did he play 90 minutes in the end?
He did.
He did, yeah. I am worried about it, but I also... it's a reflection of his status, isn't it? He is one of the first names on Mikel Arteta's team sheet currently. He's kind of integral to everything that we do. So I do have some sympathy with the manager, and I understand to an extent his reticence to leave him out. It's going to have to happen at some point, though, isn't it?
Well, I thought that. And then it hasn't.
And now you're wondering.
Like, maybe, and I understand...
Maybe he's like a freak of just being incredibly fit.
Yeah, well, exactly. Maybe this is our worry more than the worry of Mikel Arteta, his coaching staff, his medical staff, and Bukayo Saka. Like, I get it. I'm not stupid. I can see why people are concerned, and I have some concerns myself. But I think what was interesting was, after Benfica, Mikel Arteta said very specifically, we're going to have to manage his minutes with regards to Saka. And then he played him for 90 minutes in the next game. So he's either not concerned that he forgot
to drop him,
or he is willing to take a risk with Saka for the sake of what he can give us on the pitch.
Yeah, but I would like for training the next day, and he's electric, and they're saying, I would like to think that it's more that they're going on information which says, like, he's fine. Is he carrying a strain or an ache or a niggle? Does he have a little calf problem, a groin problem, a hamstring problem? If he doesn't have any of those things, and he says he's fine, that's my only rational explanation for why he played 90 minutes. Is that they're doing so from an informed position, rather than being careless and reckless with the fitness and everything else of a young player. Do you think he'll play against Benfica?
Yeah,
I think he will too. I think
we've got a much better chance of winning the game if he plays. Yeah.
Maybe there's an extent to which, I think I've mentioned this previously, but Arteta's looking at this run of fixtures and thinking, well, this is crunch time. I need him out there, and maybe he can get a rest afterwards. Yeah, I am concerned about it, and maybe it's just trauma from, memories of Jack Wilshere or something like that. Maybe I'm overthinking it. But it just strikes me that the physical demands of this season are so particular and so intense. I feel like any player who's playing as many minutes as he is at any age, with any kind of history of physical problems, would be at risk,
But does he have a history of physical problems?
No. But I just mean whatever, even if you don't, I just think this particular schedule is so intense. Even someone like Aubameyang, who's like super, super fit and never seems to need to miss a game, very rarely gets injured. I think you can even see him slightly feeling the strain. So I kind of think anybody would struggle with the sheer number of minutes he's playing.
Well, here's another question in sort of the same ballpark, but coming at it from a slightly different angle. It's from the Discord from Dancing Bear, who says, do you think Mikel is struggling to rotate correctly? Players seem to go through long spells on the sidelines. Look at Martinelli, Lacazette and Pepe prior to yesterday. All have now had 3 or 4 games and pretty much 0 minutes after playing 3 or 4 full games. Does this mean they're coming into games too cold as such? Shouldn't they be at least getting some minutes to keep that sharpness?
I am finding that a bit odd, yeah. Like, for example, Lacazette, who was sort of, a regular starter and now is sort of picking up a few minutes here and there. I do find that a curious use of resource. So I am finding that a bit confusing, to be completely honest with you. What about you?
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised at some of it, to be honest.
There's definitely a more balanced way to do it. I mean, maybe their thinking is, well, we sit these guys down for 3 or 4 games and then they come back in for 3 or 4 games. Maybe it's something like that. But it does strike me that there's a way to kind of mix it up more game by game and kind of share the load slightly more.
Yeah.
But then Arteta's scrabbling for results, isn't he? A little bit. So when he finds something that works, he sticks with it.
That's true as well.
I think that's the tension. It's all very well saying, I'm going to play Aubameyang through the middle one game, and then the next I'm going to play Lacazette. But when Aubameyang scores a hat-trick, you think, right, well, we better stick with this.
And when you play, I think we played pretty well against Benfica, even if we didn't get the goals.
Yeah.
For a team that has struggled to create, you look at the positives of that, but I do think you also have to look at the Man City game as a very different one. Like, you can't play against Man City the way you play against Benfica. So is it not the opportunity to give some guys a bit more playing time? And maybe the way to approach a game like Man City is to sit down Saka and sit down Aubameyang and put these other guys in who can do a job for you. And if you're 1-0 down after 70 minutes, when you need to have a go from the bench, or if you want to really give it a lash in the last 15, 20 minutes, those are the guys you bring on.
Yeah, I would have been fine with that. And maybe it's easier to say that having lost the game already. But I could have seen some sense in that. I do think if there was an opportunity to kind of rest players, I do feel like this was maybe the game to do it. And while we did it with some, Saka is one that I would have looked long and hard at and considered giving a proper break. It'll be interesting to see what we get on Thursday. I mean, Tom Jenkins on Twitter said, what is the first choice centre-back pairing? And which do you prefer? And who do you think will start against Benfica?
Well, I think we're now seeing that we've got 2 pairs of central defenders.
Right.
Holding and Marie and Luis and Gabriel. Which do I
think
prefer?
They're the right pairs? Like, do you think those are the best partnerships? Because I'm not convinced, actually. I'm not sure.
What do you think is the best partnership? Like Holding and Marie was pretty good in that spell of games where we kept quite a number of clean sheets. It's very difficult to assess this because the David Luiz thing is just too big of a thing in my own head. Maybe it's not just in my own head, but...
What do you mean? Like that he's so unpredictable?
Yeah. Like I cannot... Like when David Luiz is even okay, he's a good player. You know, he's experienced. I think alongside Gabriel, the fact that he's a fellow Portuguese speaker and fellow Brazilian, I think that helps. It's just...
I think he might be. I think personally, I think he on a good day, I think he's in the best 11 for me on a good day.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I mean, I agree with that.
Russian roulette, though, right?
It is Russian roulette. That's a really good way of putting it. He's a trapdoor, footballing trapdoor. You just don't know when it's going to open and cause you a problem. So that's why I think probably Luiz and Gabriel is, on paper, our best pairing. But it comes with a big question mark, or with that sort of doubt hanging over you about what might happen when Luiz is on the pitch, because we've seen it so many times. So,
yeah, if you were picking an Arsenal team to sort of, you know, play a cup final or play for your life, I think I would pick Luiz, but you would know in doing it there was probably a 25% chance it would really backfire. Yeah, maybe Luiz and Gabriel is the best partnership. You know, Rob Holding, I think, had a really good, consistent season until recently. And in fact, art teacher, who's at Drawing Man 15, said, Rob Holding has been so reliable this season. Do you think his recent mistakes are a sign of mental fatigue because of all the games he's played? Or is he just a player with limitations?
It's a good question. I did like this from Gaslight Arsenal, who said, should Rob Holding change his name to Rob Respectful Distance? He could have been Holding, Sterling and Ollie Watkins, of course. I think I said this to you the other week about Holding. I think he's a good squad player, but I think his limitations mean that there are going to be periods in his season where his mistakes cost you. You know, I like him. I think he's an honest guy. I think what's frustrating about yesterday in particular for me is that one of his strengths this season has been in the air, in our box. He wins a lot of crosses, heads away a lot of crosses, a lot of corners, a lot of set pieces. He seems to be the guy who's going to attack the ball. So one of the frustrations for me about yesterday was the fact that he was beaten in the air so easily by Raheem Sterling, who's 5'6" or 5 foot whatever he is, 5'8", I don't know, small. So I think Holding for me is a squad player. I would, I don't think he's the quality of defender that you can build your team around.
No, I don't think he is for what our aspirations are.
And look, I'm not saying that that's what Arsenal think he is either. Because from what we understand, they're keeping their eye on, or they're looking for a right-sided centre-half, whoever that might be, come the summer. And that's Holding's position nominally, right? So I think he's a decent player, but he's limited, and I think some of his limitations have been exposed in the last couple of starts for him. And some of those limitations, whether it's mental fatigue or just a lapse of concentration or getting switched on straight away, it's really impossible to say, isn't it? Because you can't measure the tiredness of somebody's brain.
No, I mean, I saw this tweet from Ryan Hunn, who said, wild to see pundits criticising player performances still, without the slightest hint of an acknowledgement they are deep into physical and mental conditions no professional footballers have ever been in before. And, all players are in that boat, but it is an interesting, that sort of mental and physical fatigue and how that might impact performance, I do think is relatively absent from the conversation around players at the moment, and it must be a factor.
Yeah, it must be, but then it is a factor for every player.
Sure, some will handle it better than others.
Some will handle it better than others, and maybe this is something that teams and managers and coaches and players themselves will learn from. Because these circumstances have been so trying, that you maybe learn things about players that you wouldn't normally have learned. And maybe that then informs your decision about, how you build your squad going forward. Can I just make another point here? And this isn't critical or to be critical of Rob Holding himself, because I have to think this is an instruction.
Yes.
The first half, Man City kicked off. They played the ball backwards. They kept the ball, passed it around, and inside 2 minutes scored a goal. The second half kicked off. We played the ball back to Rob Holding. He did what he's done countless times this season in this very circumstance, which is launch the ball towards the left-hand side.
It is clearly an instruction.
It's clearly an instruction, and he's only doing what he's told, but it fucking drives me mental. It drives me insane. Why are we giving the ball away? Why doesn't Rob Holding, play it to his central defensive partner, or play it out to Hector Bellerin, or play it into midfield to one of the midfield players? Why don't we keep the ball? What is the point of this? Why are we doing it? Somebody please ask Mikel Arteta. I know some of the guys who are on the Arsenal beat listen to this podcast, so please, you guys, I'm begging you, somebody ask Mikel Arteta what the fuck that is and why we continue to do it, because it happened at the start of the second half yesterday, and I wanted to kick my TV in. And I like my TV. It's nice.
Please don't do that.
No.
No TVs will be harmed in the making of this podcast. But it must be about territory. It feels very rugby, doesn't it?
It's just rugby. That's exactly it. Kick for touch. Yeah. Pen them in. I don't get it. I don't get it for a manager who's so concerned about what we do with the ball. And at the very least, you can say, Arteta is aware, I think, of the problems that we've had. The quality of the ball in the final third, the quality of our decision making. He's sort of aware of the problems we have. When he talked earlier in the season about how we don't create enough chances and score enough goals, he found some sort of a solution in the last few months. But I just don't understand what this is.
No, if I had to hazard a guess, I would say that it must be the brainchild of the set-piece coach, and they must think... I would imagine they look at teams' ability to retain the ball from throw-ins deep inside their own half, and maybe they think that's actually quite a difficult thing to do in the modern game, which I understand it is increasingly difficult because you get penned in and pressed. And they think, well, maybe we can kind of capitalise on that.
Okay,
but
how many, whether it's in the first minute of the game or the 46th minute of the game, how many times have we exploited the potential weakness of an opponent in dealing with a throw deep in their own half and scored a goal? I'd love to know. To
my memery, I don't know. Probably none.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, I'm not defending it, but I'm just trying to figure out why on earth you might do it.
Yeah.
Because I agree, it seems very strange. But yeah, hopefully he will get asked, and if I get an opportunity, I will ask him myself. But let's see. I
might write him a letter.
Write him. I'll just, he's on Twitter, isn't he?
No, he doesn't look at his social media at all.
So he claims. He claims. I never believe it.
A good old-fashioned letter. Dear Mr. Arteta.
Dear... It has come to my attention.
Yours frustratedly.
Have you got a question, by the way? Because I feel like I've probably done a few in a row.
I think I've done the few in a row. Have I?
Oh, okay. All right. I've got one.
Yeah.
I've got one.
Okay.
It's from Joan, who's at AFC Joan. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's spelled Jone. They say, morning, folks. Seems like sacrilege, but is cashing in on Saka an option we should explore?
Stop it. Stop.
Let me finish the question.
No.
Would hopefully fetch north of 100 million and could fund our squad rebuild.
No.
Liverpool did it with Coutinho, and things didn't work out too bad for them.
No. Absolutely not. I mean, I can think of stupid things that Arsenal Football Club have done in the past, in the recent past, in the distant past, somewhere in the middle. I can think of all kinds of stupid things that we have done. But selling Bukayo Saka as we're trying to rebuild a team based around players of a particular age profile, that just seems really stupid to me. Now, if we're 2 years down the line and we haven't made any progress and a big team comes calling for him, I mean, I think a big part of what we've got to do as a football club is ensure that Arsenal is a place that Bukayo Saka wants to spend a significant part of his career. Because he's just a really, really good footballer. He's grown up at Hale End. He's come through to the first team. I just don't see how any Arsenal fan could conceivably, realistically consider how selling Bukayo Saka this summer would be of any benefit to us whatsoever, particularly when we're on the fence at best about our recruitment ability
that's
too.
The key,
right?
Isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's all about how you spend the money. Liverpool, yes, they got 100 million for Coutinho, but for me, that's not the reason they're successful. The reason they're successful is they spent that money incredibly smartly. And look at Spurs when they sold Gareth Bale. They had this huge windfall. They spent 100 million quid
on 8 players,
Eric Lamela and, a bunch of players who did nothing for them, essentially. I would have serious concerns about how we might spend that money and if we would actually be in a better position. That said, I can't lie. I watch Bukayo Saka and I think this is a player that is going to the very top. And obviously we ain't the very top right now.
No, we're not. But I mean, how do you ever hope to get there if you sell Bukayo Saka? We might not get anywhere close to being where he wants to be, and there might come a time, and I hope it doesn't happen. But, as I said, if we don't make any progress and he continues his progress as a player, he's going to go to Man City, or he's going to go to, a bigger club, a better club with more money, and more chances of winning things. That's the reality. But to sort of do it now is to just throw in the towel.
Yeah, that's where I really think it would be a mistake. Certainly this summer. I think there's lots of reasons why. I mean, first of all, I think the world of Saka. I think getting 100 million quid from him in this climate would be, that would. I don't necessarily see that as a realistic prospect. In a couple of years' time, when he's a regular in the England team and an even better player than he is now, who knows what sort of money he would command, and also who knows where we'll be. I think you're right. If we're not in a position to help him fulfill his ambitions in a few years' time, the decision will kind of be out of our hands. I mean, ultimately, clubs can dig in their heels to an extent, but when a player says, I'm not going to sign a new contract, you sell that player. Unless you're Arsenal, you just let them wait until the end, leave for
free, yeah.
But, ultimately, the decision isn't always the club's. And it may be that some of these young players that we have ultimately do fund a kind of another rebooted project, but that will mean, if that is the case, it will mean the current project we're on has not worked.
Yeah, but I mean, I think you're right to say that there are going to be some young players, but you can think of other young players who maybe don't have quite the same talent or the same ceiling as Bukayo Saka, who could still fetch us reasonable money in the market. You use your academy to generate funds. And like if it's a Maitland-Niles or a Joe Willock or an Eddie Nketiah who gives you that money, that's surely the right way to do it. The issue isn't we don't solve our problems by getting rid of Bukayo Saka. We need more players like Bukayo Saka or players of that level if we're going to get back to where we want to be. Simple as that for me.
I agree. I just can't. I suppose I'm not confident. I'm not confident that we're going to be able to do that. I hope we are, but I'm not confident right now.
Yeah, but I mean, even so, this summer is just no.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. And On the subject of Eddie Nketiah, by the way, Dazzy Pepper on Discord said, what's happening with Nketiah? In the middle of a very busy period, a necessarily rotated side, he doesn't even make the bench. Is this a signal he's likely gone in the summer?
Yeah.
Yeah, looks that
I mean,
way,
I've had questions, people saying, what's going on with Reece Nelson? Well, he's playing for the under-23s.
Yeah.
That's what's going on with Reece Nelson. Now, quite why that is, what's gone on behind the scenes to make that happen, I'm in the dark, I should say, in that sense. But that's what's happening. And I think you can read a lot into his situation.
Yeah, and Eddie Nketiah, I mean, right now, I feel like Lacazette's got a better chance of being here next season than Nketiah.
Yeah. I mean, as well, look, I think for all the frustration, I think there have been players who've been given chances who haven't particularly impressed. Not that they played really, really badly, but they just haven't lived up to expectations. Nketiah is probably one of them. Even Willian, who nobody is keen to talk about, and I don't particularly want to talk about him or dredge that up again. He hasn't started a Premier League game for 2 months.
No.
So there is at least some tacit acknowledgement that the guys who've had chances, not that they've blown their chances, but they're not playing at the moment. So he can't complain about that, really, given that that's what people want to see. If you don't play well, you don't play.
No, I mean, yeah, he's getting the odd cameo here and there, but he's not started again for a long time.
Okay, here's a question from Jezza on the Discord who says, hey guys, we're 2 or 3 positions away from being, or Pep said rather, we're 2 or 3 positions away from being a real force in his post-match interview. What positions do you think he meant? And also from the Discord, we have one from, the font is always so small, Daniel Refat, who says, or Daniel Rafat, I don't know. He says, do you take anything from Pep's comments about Arteta after the game? He's always so complimentary about what he says, saying we'll compete for titles very soon, but I'm never sure if he's just looking out for a friend and talking him up in the media.
Can I be honest? I don't take anything from what Pep says, especially after he's just beaten us. It really feels like...
So happy. He's so happy.
Yeah.
He's so happy all the time.
Mikel is so clever. Honestly, he knows everything. I'm reminded of, do you remember in Disney's Fantasia, The Sorcerer's Apprentice? They do a kind of adaptation of that, and Mickey Mouse is the apprentice, and the sorcerer's away, and he gets all the brooms. They all go out of control. For me, that's sort of what happened when Arteta put Willian as the false 9 at the Etihad. It just kind of spiraled beyond his control. But the sorcerer, he's the real boss. He knows what's going on. Right. I mean, Arteta beat Guardiola in the FA Cup semi-final, and that shouldn't be forgotten. But Guardiola's talking from a comfortable position of superiority there, I think. What was the first part of the question? What are the 2 or 3 positions?
Yeah, he said we're 2 or 3 positions away from being a real force.
Well, something I think we probably don't talk about enough is how much it's killing us that Thomas Partey is just not available. Like, that is huge. The main thing that Mikel Arteta had to address in the summer was central midfield. He spent 50 million euros on a world-class central midfield player, and he's not played 10 games.
Yeah. It's an issue.
It's a big thing. And if he was fit all season, and listen, when you buy a player from abroad who's not played in the Premier League before, maybe there is a risk in terms of how they handle the physical intensity and an adaptation to undergo. But that's the first position I think of. And I almost find myself forgetting sometimes that we bought that player. And he's been very, very good when he's played. And it kind of makes you feel the absence all the more keenly.
His absence feels sort of one of the inevitabilities of the season in a way, doesn't it? It's sort of like, of course, he's not there.
Yeah,
and, I think you're right to point out how different we would be as a team with him if he were fully fit and everything else. I mean, do you expect him for Benfica?
I don't. No. I think if we did, maybe Danny Ceballos plays yesterday. So I think that's a huge factor, and undoubtedly, and this is not an excuse for Mikel Arteta, but undoubtedly we would be a better team if Thomas Partey had played every Premier League game, but we haven't. And so that's the first area of the pitch I think of. 2 or 3 other positions. I still think centre-back. And increasingly, maybe right-back. What do you think?
I mean, central midfield is the obvious one for me.
I mean, even with Partey, I'd argue we need another one,
I would also maybe, I'd err towards centre-half as well. Even if our defensive record has been statistically pretty good. But I can't help but think that if we had another goal scorer in the team, this season wouldn't look quite as bad. I mean, I think our issues are how you want to tie them up together. It's up to you. But goal scoring and creating, right? When you look at the results that we've had this season, when you look at the games we've lost in the Premier League, 1-0 to Man City, 1-0 to Leicester, 2-1 Wolves, 1-0 to Burnley, 2-1 to Everton, 2-1 to Wolves, 1-0 to Aston Villa, 1-0 to Man City. There's a lot of 1-goal defeats in there, where even if you're not scoring 2 to get you the 3 points, you're capable of getting the 1 goal that will get you a point. You know what I mean? So I feel like...
It's our goals for column that's the biggest issue.
So I think Saka has obviously stepped up in the last few weeks, but we don't get enough goals. So another goal scorer in that front three would be especially useful, I think. Like, I don't think you can be considered... Like, when you talk about right back, could we be better there? Yes. But if you're talking about being a force, you can't be a force unless you score goals.
No, you're right. You're right. And I had to be fair, I don't think it is a 3-position job. I think Pep's wrong about that.
It's 8.
It's like 7 or 8. And one I have talked about since the summer, really, I do think is centre forward, and having someone who you could bring on in that last 20 minutes of that game who genuinely enables you to change the dynamic, the type of football you play, gives you real presence in the penalty box. I'm not sure Arsenal have that striker. But we need goals more generally in the team. Of course we do. We need goals all over the team. So listen, I mentioned strikers there. It was interesting. There was a lot of talk about Aubameyang or sort of suddenly again yesterday, and Pramod AFC said, why is Aubameyang not being questioned for lack of fight? Is Alba actually a threat for defenders anymore when the team is not playing well?
Lack of fight. I mean, I don't know how we can gauge that or measure that. You know what I mean?
Well, it's also not something he had and he lost. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think his temperament has dramatically changed. He's always been this guy.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah. I mean,
and it's enabled him to excel. He hasn't needed to be a guy racing into challenges, and he doesn't need to be Luis Suarez to score goals.
True. He's a guy who depends on service. That's who he is. That's who he's always been. I don't think...
They went in quite hard on him on Sky after the game.
Yeah, I saw Jamie Redknapp say he's basically finished, didn't he?
There was an incident where he went one-on-one with Stones and came off second best, but I mean...
Well, I think that was 100% a foul.
I'm looking at it now,
100% a foul. Like, if that happens anywhere else on the pitch, it's a foul.
That is a foul. But...
No, I mean, I get the general concern about his inability to run past defenders.
Yeah.
You know, his legs aren't quite what they were. That's true. The pace isn't quite there. But if you're using that as an example of him being past it, that's not it.
Yeah.
You know?
Personally, I don't quite buy this thing of he's finished. You know, he did score a hat-trick 2 games ago.
Yeah. And should have
scored a hat-trick. Well, should have scored at least one against Benfica.
Yeah.
Yes, he didn't really have an opportunity in this game, but I'm not sure that's on him, really.
I agree.
Listen, you can always do more.
I think there's a slight conflation here between Aubameyang the striker and Aubameyang the captain. And I think sometimes what people want to see from their captain is different from what Aubameyang gives you. And particularly when you're going through a difficult period, when you're maybe not playing well, or, you know, when you've lost as many games as we have this season, you want to see your captain being affronted by that. But, you know, these are the players that we've got. He's not a Roy Keane or a Tony Adams.
No.
But as we've said many times on this podcast before, those players are rare. They're really rare.
Yeah.
That's why they stand out. You know, we haven't had a Tony Adams since Tony Adams.
No.
That's not for the want of trying, is it? You know?
Yeah, exactly. And there are plenty of successful teams with milder-mannered players in them.
Who was Man City's captain yesterday?
I have got a clue.
Me neither.
Yeah.
So
precisely.
Could it have been Raheem Sterling? I don't know.
I genuinely don't know who their captain was.
Let me see if they have it on their Twitter when they do their team lineup thing.
I'm sort of thinking it through in my mind, wondering who it could be.
Gundogan, maybe, or De Bruyne, perhaps.
De Bruyne, maybe, yeah. But you know, the point stands, and I couldn't tell you who captains a lot of teams these days because I think the role has kind of diminished.
Fernandinho,
there you go. Experienced player.
Very experienced player. Had a great game yesterday. But is he like a snarling beast, or is he a guy who just does his job really fucking well?
Yeah. I mean, I guess what people might say about Aubameyang is he doing his job really fucking well this season?
No, he's not. But then
he ain't alone in that.
No.
And I do think, you know, when you look at the number, as we've said many times, the number of attacking players who seem to have found a bit of a rut in this Arsenal team. I don't want to go overboard because there have been encouraging signs from the attack recently. And even against Benfica, we created a lot of decent chances.
Yeah.
So maybe this was just a difficult day against an outstanding team. And maybe the trajectory is still positive. But yeah, it's interesting. I found it interesting how quickly Aubameyang was kind of being debated again. Yeah. Maybe that's going to happen when you're that age. Maybe. And you get the contract and everything else. Yeah. But I'd understand much more a debate or a discussion about Aubameyang after the Benfica game than yesterday's. Mm-hmm. You know, and if you're highlighting a moment where he was clearly fouled as evidence of his past itness, then, you know, you're setting up straw men basically to have that argument, which isn't to say that Aubameyang hasn't had issues this season. Of course he has, but yesterday was not the game, I think. And people will say, look, well, you know, it's the job of the captain to lead the team and to, you know, drag the team through, you know, difficult periods, etc., etc. And he could have played better yesterday. I firmly believe that. I think some of the hold-up play was really poor. But, you know, that's not the evidence that he's finished for me. Not doing it against Man City, because plenty of strikers who are still at it and, you know, just starting and everything else will have games like that against Man City. But speaking about the attack, Dean, who's at DJ Stanners, says, are you concerned with how little we're seeing of Martinelli? And there were many questions about this. Yeah, and we're getting this question regularly at the moment, which I think tells its own story. Am I concerned? A little bit. I've said before, I have this slight hesitance with Arteta and Martinelli, where what he said about the player and his actions don't quite add up to me. You know, he's been incredibly positive about him and his impact, but he's never come close to starting him regularly. Now, granted, he's had injury problems, but even when he's been fit, the introduction has been slow. So yeah, I have some concerns about that. I mean, do I think Martinelli should be starting ahead of Pepe, Saka, Smith Rowe? Probably not at the moment. So I can understand why he's not getting a load of game time. My issue is when people like Willian get it instead, you know?
Sure.
But that wasn't the case yesterday.
No.
What do you think?
I'd like to see more of him, but I do wonder if... Yeah, I'm not hugely concerned because he is still 19. He is just coming back from injuries.
By the way, as well, I don't think Martinelli... personally, I haven't seen enough of Martinelli to be able to say that he is a talent who is at the level of, say, a Saka. I personally think he's a really exciting young player, but I'm not sure he has that innate maturity and decision-making that Saka seems to have that just makes him look like a guy who's 26, been playing his whole life and, you know, absolutely established. I haven't quite seen that with enough consistency from Martinelli to be like, he should be playing every week, personally.
Sure. I mean, I get that. But I think as well, you have to look at the impact he had in his first season and the goals that he scored and the way that he scored some of those goals. You know, and I'm thinking particularly some of the early goals he scored in the Europa League, the headers, where I think you can see a maturity in the finishing. Is that the right way to put it? I mean, I think those are the kind of, like, for example, there was one header I can't remember who the fuck we were playing. I think it was a Kieran Tierney cross, and he headed it from the near post.
I know the goal you mean.
Like, that's the kind of finish that if Olivier Giroud had made, we'd say, wow, what a fucking great header that was. And that's from a guy who's played a long career and one of whose key strengths is his aerial ability, right? So I think that we saw enough from Martinelli to be excited about what he could bring to this team in the penalty area.
Yeah.
I just wonder if the issue isn't so much what he can give us in the penalty area, it's what he can do when he's not in it, if that makes sense, and how we either adapt him to be more of a penalty box player, whether they see him long term as kind of a striker or a left winger.
I hope they do, personally.
Yeah, I kind of hope they do too, which... You know, he came on against Benfica, didn't he?
Yeah. As
the striker, he didn't get much service. So I'm not...
He did come on ahead of Lacazette in that game, which suggests he's not completely out of Arteta's thoughts.
No, I mean, that's a game that we were playing well in. We'd made chances in. Another goal would have been very valuable in. And Arteta decided that our best option on the night was to give Martinelli a go. So, I don't quite buy into the idea that Arteta doesn't rate Martinelli. I don't quite understand why he's not getting minutes in certain games, but I don't really buy into that idea that he just doesn't think he's worth playing.
No, I mean, I do think that there is a degree to which he thinks him and Aubameyang are kind of similar players. You know, it was telling against Benfica, he came on for Aubameyang. And when he started against Manchester United, I think I'm right in saying Aubameyang was unavailable to us. And I haven't seen Arteta pick them alongside each other with any regularity. And I do wonder if that's part of it. That when he thinks about the chemistry, the balance of that front four, rightly or wrongly, he believes it's one of those two. But it's not an easy question to answer, because I would like to see more of Martinelli. And just because I don't think his talent level is the same as Saka's, it doesn't mean I don't think he's a great prospect. But it's not easy to answer how and where he should be put in and at the expense of whom. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's fair.
But he seems to me like someone who would be a very good substitute. You know, he's someone who comes on very high energy, great intensity to his game, you know, has goal threat. In these games where we are chasing goals, I'm a little bit surprised he doesn't get those opportunities. You know, he didn't. I remember Aston Villa as well. He didn't get off the bench in that one. I found that one odd.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and that's, I'm not to make any excuses for it, but I think that was a substitution we fudged because of what happened to Partey. We had
with Willian. Yeah.
You know, but even then, it was Willian coming on.
True.
So,
what about this question?
let's have it and let's make it the final one because we've been going
Ian
a long time.
Stone has texted it to me. He said, I was going to tweet a question for the Arsecast, but it might be too late. It's not too late, Ian. Not for you. Is it satisfactory, he says, for the manager of a team of Arsenal stature to describe a round of 32 match in the Europa League as a final?
I don't have any issue with that. I don't. You know, it look, if you're going to take it absolutely literally, of course not. But I think what he's doing is stressing the importance of the game.
How important is it?
Very important. Like, I don't see us as a team that can win the Europa League. And I know...
Really? You don't think we can?
I just... You know what worries me?
That we're really not very good?
That, but also the other English teams. I have kind of this sickening feeling in my stomach about some of the other English teams.
One in particular?
Any of them. I hate them all. But it is an important game. I think we've sort of gone so far we haven't had a chance to have the discussion about, you know, this season and where it is and what we should think about it and everything else. But maybe we'll do that a different day.
I think it's good to talk about the stakes on Thursday night.
I don't think it changes anything in terms of what's going to happen at the club.
Yeah,
right?
Materially, I don't think it matters massively. But it will change the mood among the supporters. I
agree. I don't think it will change the club's plans or what they're going to do or how they're going to approach things or anything like that. It will change, or it might change people's view of Arteta, the manager, how the club is being run, those kind of things. So, I mean, from our perspective, it's different. I just think that whatever happens on Thursday and whatever happens between now and the end of the season, unless it's something incredibly bad, Mikel Arteta is going to be in charge next season. I think that's the reality of our situation, right? Whether people like it or not, or are comfortable with it or confident in it, I think that's what's going to happen. One way or the other. But I don't have any issue with him describing the game against Benfica as a final, because it highlights the importance of what we've got to do. Call every game between now and the end of the season a final. I don't give a fuck. But we have to kind of approach games with that sort of mindset, I think, because, you know, I see all the talk about, well, we should just focus on Europe. No, we can't. We've got, 13 games, 14 games left to play in the Premier League. We can't just focus on Europe. We have to win as many of those games as we can. So if approaching them on a game-by-game basis, each game being the next most important one, I'm okay with that. You know, so I don't think it's a case that he's, you know, saying, well, this is a final. I think he's just really talking about how important this game is and the attitude with which the players need to take to the field, which is, you know, don't lose concentration inside 2 minutes and let a goal in. That sort of thing. You know, I think it's about
that would be nice,
concentrating the minds of his players on the job they have at hand. And then Leicester's a final. And then whoever the fuck we've got, Burnley's a final. And each game after that.
Yeah.
You know,
well, and it's Tottenham.
And you know, I think what's another interesting, just very interesting, quick sidebar to the Europa League thing is people say it's a way back into the Champions League. Like, I'm not sure we're 100% ready for the Champions League.
I mean, it wouldn't be fun watching, I don't think.
No, but isn't the main thing to win the fucking trophy? Not the secondary reward. Isn't the main thing that you would win the Europa League
Cup for only the third time in Arsenal's history? Yeah, that should be. But in fairness, I understand why people say that.
Yeah, I do as well. But like
financially, it's a lifeline, you know.
Yeah. I get it. But
and players care about it. Mm-hmm. Players care about playing in it. I'm always slightly surprised by how much they care about playing in it, but they do.
Yeah. Try not to lose 11 games, and you might have a better chance of being in it.
Yeah.
Players.
Yeah, you players.
Right.
Well, listen, it's a big game.
It is.
We'll see what we get.
It is. Fingers crossed. You know, if we can play pretty much the way we played in the first leg, but make our finishing better, I think we'll go through. So,
yeah. They didn't show a huge amount to worry us in that particular game. I suppose the question that I can't answer is, was that them on a really bad day, or is that just their level?
I think the thing we've got to worry about most is ourselves.
Well, definitely.
Yeah. Given our track record.
That's definitely what's worrying me most.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, look, that's something we will discuss later in the week on another podcast, of course. As ever, thank you very much indeed for being here. Thank you for your support. Thanks for listening, for all your subscriptions, for the reviews and everything else. We really do appreciate it. We will catch you on the next one.
Bye.